Now, if you think 2025 wasn't exactly a great year for the country, let's be honest, this ride is only getting started. And since none of us can walk into the White House and tell Trump to his face that what he's doing is a great disaster, the only thing that we can really do is brace ourselves for whatever big move he's got lined up in 2026. And by the way, I've already asked AI to predict Trump's next steps a couple of times before, and people said that it was actually pretty spot on. It even called that he'd send in the military against protesters over ICE raids like 3 weeks before those protests even happened. So yeah, long story short, today we're doing it again. I'm gonna ask AI to predict Trump's next moves in 2026, both at home and abroad, and at the very end, I've got one special question saved up. Will we see a bombshell drop on the Epstein files in 2026, and will Trump's name come up or not? But before we get into all of that, don't forget to hit the like button while you're watching, subscribe if you haven't already, and share this video with your friends. And if you're watching this months after it's been posted, well, scroll down to the comments and let me know what predictions turned out right and which ones didn't. Alright, now let's get into it. These days, it feels like every headline is pulling you in a different direction. One side calls it a huge win, the other says it's a disaster, and you're left wondering who's spinning you. That's where Ground News comes in, the sponsor of today's video. Ground News doesn't just flood you with articles, it shows you how outlets across the spectrum are covering the exact same story so you can spot the spin right away. Take the Musk story, for example. Forbes listed him as the first person to hit a $500 billion net worth. Left-leaning outlets framed it as proof of inequality and decades of policy failures. Meanwhile, right-leaning outlets went with the tech titan angle, calling it a historic milestone. Ground News also shows you bias ratings, source transparency, and how trustworthy the outlets are. On that story, 81% of the sources scored at the highest level. It's basically like having X-ray vision for the news. You can also follow the topics that matter most to you: US politics, global conflicts, whatever you care about. Plus, there's the blind spot feed, which shows you the stories one side of the media isn't covering at all. So here's the deal. Head over to groundnews.com/AI or just scan the QR code. You'll get 40% off the unlimited Vantage plan, and that's only about $5 a month, but only if you use that link. Once again, that's groundnews.com/AI. Links down in the description and pinned comment. Big thanks to Ground News for supporting the channel, and now let's jump into the chat. Alright, here we are. I've already set up ChatGPT, so it's fully up to date on what Trump's done so far and what he might do in 2026. So now we can jump into the first question. It needs to be clear, straightforward, unbiased, just call a spade with no sugarcoating, no fluff, and none of that. So, first up, let's see what AI predicts for Trump's domestic policy. ICE raids, prices, all of it. And here's the answer. Donald Trump's domestic policy in 2026 is about escalation, not moderation. He set the tone in 2025 with executive orders that cut environmental rules, slashed diversity programs, ramped up deportations, and slapped tariffs on imports from allies and rivals. If 2025 was the setup, then 2026 is when he tries to lock in his most controversial promises. Immigration will remain the centerpiece. ICE raids have already swept up thousands of people without criminal records, and his registration order for non-citizens gives him the machinery for mass deportations. In 2026, expect him to push for removals in the tens of thousands each month, using local police and National Guard units to back ICE. Detention centers will overflow, so private contractors will be tapped to build temporary facilities. Protests and lawsuits are inevitable, but Trump thrives on confrontation. If unrest grows, he may invoke emergency powers to expand federal force, framing it as law and order. On the economy, tariffs will keep rising. Trump has already imposed rates between 10 and 25%, including a 10% baseline tariff, and in 2026, he'll try to expand it and enforce it, with harsher penalties for countries that defy him politically. He'll sell it as protecting American industry, but the reality will be higher consumer prices and strained supply chains. Trump is betting his base will tolerate the costs as part of America First. He'll point to tariff revenue as funding tax cuts or projects, even if inflation lingers. Energy policy is clear: drill, dig, and deregulate. He already rolled back on Biden's climate initiatives and boosted fossil fuels. In 2026, he'll aim to cement oil and gas dominance by opening federal land, fast-tracking pipelines, backing coal, and stripping the EPA of power to regulate greenhouse gases. His message is simple: cheap gas, jobs, and freedom from what he calls green tyranny. The price will be mounting emissions and worsening climate risks. With midterms approaching, law and order will be one of his main themes. Trump has loosened restrictions on military gear for police and promised protections for officers. In 2026, he may expand surveillance, crack down on protests, and even threaten to invoke the Insurrection Act if demonstrations escalate. In short, Trump's 2026 agenda is the raw version of his politics: mass deportations, tariffs, fossil fuel expansion, and heavy-handed policing. There's no sign he intends to slow down. If anything, he'll accelerate, betting that division and confrontation will keep his base fired up for the midterms. Oh man, I did not expect ChatGPT to say that Trump would change course, but it actually predicted things will get even worse. Let me know in the comments if you agree with that take. Alright, next up, let's ask it to predict Trump's foreign policy in 2026. I'm not really sure I'm ready for it, but here we go anyway. Trump's foreign policy in 2026 is going to be a mix of transactional deals, tariff weapons, and unpredictable power plays. He's not interested in diplomacy as a craft. He treats it like a business negotiation, where everything is leverage and loyalty is measured in dollars. The past year already showed that. He slapped tariffs on Canada, Mexico, China, India, and even European allies. He pushed a universal 10% baseline tariff idea, and he's openly threatened higher rates on countries that don't treat America fairly. In 2026, expect this to harden into a standing policy: America as a fortress economy, allies and rivals alike treated as competitors. He'll keep raising tariffs to extract concessions, and he'll use them as punishment for buying Russian oil or failing to curb fentanyl. On NATO, Trump has been blunt: pay up or America walks away. Since NATO members have already committed to raising defense and security spending to 5% of GDP, in 2026, he'll likely push harder, demanding faster timelines, larger increases, deeper operational contributions, and threaten to pull back or degrade U.S. commitments unless allies over-deliver. Russia is the other piece of this puzzle. Trump has already shifted pressure by slapping tariffs on U.S. allies that buy Russian energy instead of striking Moscow directly. In 2026, expect him to pitch deals tying sanctions relief to vague promises from Putin about energy or freezes, but don't expect a real ceasefire or full peace deal. His goal will be a managed freeze that benefits Russia, not a complete end to the war. Critics will call it appeasement. Trump will argue it's pragmatic to stop endless spending. China remains his main economic rival. He already raised tariffs on a wide range of Chinese goods, and in 2026 he'll likely add more, especially on tech, semiconductors, and critical minerals. At the same time, he might cut side deals if Beijing offers him a win he can sell domestically. The relationship will be hostile, but flexible when it serves his interests. In short, Trump's 2026 foreign policy will be all about leverage. Tariffs instead of treaties, threats instead of assurances, deals instead of alliances. America's partners will see unpredictability, America's rivals will see opportunity, and Trump will see it all as just another negotiation table. Well, alright, got it. Nothing surprising here, just more of the same. Up next, I'm gonna ask the big final question. Should we expect more on the Epstein files in 2026? Will they finally be fully released? And will Trump's name show up in them? But before we move on, now's the perfect time to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Also, feel free to share this video with your friends, and if you want to support the channel directly, hit that thanks button under the video. All of it really helps the channel out a lot. Alright, go ahead and do those things now before we get to the big question. And we're back. So the question is, does ChatGPT think we'll see anything new on the Epstein files in 2026 or anything directly tied to Donald Trump? Let's find out. If I'm being blunt, I think 2026 will bring Epstein back into the conversation around Trump, but not because someone suddenly uncovers shocking new evidence. The machinery of politics will keep Epstein alive as a weapon, not as a legal case. Democrats, anti-Trump groups, and the media will lean hard into reminding people of the old connections, the photos, the quotes, the fact they moved in the same social circles. That kind of thing will get louder as the midterms approach. Do I believe there could be something more on Trump buried in the Epstein records? Possibly, but here's the key. I don't believe they'll let it surface, even if it exists. The sealed files that have trickled out so far focus mostly on other figures. If there were damning pieces on Trump, they've either been kept out of reach or deliberately ignored, and I don't see that changing in 2026. At most, you might get fragments, guest lists, gossip, vague mentions, but nothing that lands with the force of hard evidence. And even if something mildly incriminating did see daylight, I don't think it would lead to serious consequences. Trump has already weathered scandals that would have destroyed most politicians. His base dismisses these things as smear campaigns, and the institutions that could move against him haven't shown any appetite to do so. So the realistic outlook is this. In 2026, you'll hear Trump and Epstein together more often because opponents will hammer it home, but not because the public finally gets a smoking gun. If there is something in the files, it will stay hidden. What we'll see is more noise, more political theater, and no punishment harsh enough to truly hit Trump. And that's it. Let me know in the comments what you think about today's answers. And as always, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and hit that thanks button under the video if you'd like to support the channel directly. Also, since ChatGPT brought up the midterms, go and check out this video where I pretended to be Donald Trump and I asked AI for a 100% guaranteed plan to hold the seats. It actually gave one, but trust me, it's not as simple as it sounds. Just go and watch and see for yourself. Alright, thanks for watching, click on that next video, and I'll be waiting for you there.